getting back to his experience with minority business development, because he had an exclusive contract for about 15 years, there came a point, and I think I'm going to say it was around 1978, that he started getting some competition from other business developers who felt like there was had an exclusive too long, that there was some hanky panky going on in terms of the favoritism that was going on, for him to have a office and a staff to do that type of development for so long. Because like I say, he had about 15 or so staff people working for him that were putting together business plans. They were finding the financing. They were finding insurance companies in order to keep these businesses going, because the average business life in a minority business life at the time was no more than about 5 years. So that was his job, was to keep them in business. And when he started getting competition from other people who wanted the contract, Ombi and the Small Business Administration delayed his funding. It went on for about 9 months. They would not release his funding. So they had a staff of about 8 or 9 people in order to pay, but they weren't sending the money down to him. So finally, after the investigation ended and they saw that Dad wasn't participating in any kind of sole proprietorship, minority set aside, or as though he had some sort of a political angle going on in D.C., they released the monies to him to pay the back salaries. And then this is when he decided that he wanted to get out of the business and form General Services. And he used the example of success of Falls in the janitorial business in order to do, like you say, Stephanie, various businesses. So the first business that General Services had was a minority business doing janitorial work for the Army base. He was doing janitorial work, and Dad didn't know anything about janitorial work. I remember coming from Atlanta one night when Dad was looking to get paid to do. I went over to Fort McCullough. Dad had a contract with Fort McCullough, and I think he was picking up from something that Falls couldn't reach out to. Fort McCullough in Anderson, Alabama, had a contract in doing floors. And I remember coming from Atlanta to join Dad, and we stayed up all night long stripping and waxing floors over there in Fort McCullough and everything. And Dad was hitting the panic button and everything, because he said he had to get this done. He had to get it waxed down because he was going to get an inspection, and he had to get the inspection done so he can get paid. So we was going through all this stuff and making the buffer work. But I had the experience of working a little more with John Tory stuff, because my first job was working with Uncle Willie James. He had some offices over in Birmingham, so I was kind of work with Dad and work with the wax and work with the buffer. But we got it done in time for the inspection. But that was but he didn't continue in janitorial work. But then he started picking up on the security guard. And so in the security guard business, he had cultivated a relationship with Joe Bruno's. And so the Bruno's had all these stores around Birmingham, and Dad had all of the security guards for all of the stores during the time that they were open. He even had one over in North Birmingham. He had one night in having the store in North Birmingham. 2 boys came in there, went to the back of the store and shot Dad's security guard dead, and came back and robbed the store over there in North Birmingham. Dad had. Yeah, this was one of Joe Bruno's stores in North Birmingham. So Bruno got his start over there on 8th Avenue, but then they spread all over the city. They was on 6th Avenue, and they got started on Greymount or 8th Avenue before they started moving all over the city. And they had stores, 10 or 12 stores all over the city. And Dad had the security guards in all the stores. And then what Dad also told me that and this gets back to what you were saying in terms of doing the feasibility study. The late Joe Bruno's asked Dad that, when Dad asked him how his security guards doing, other than the fact that one was murdered, he was satisfied with him, and said that if he was so satisfied with him that if you could do my money pickups, because I'm tired of Brinks and Wells Fargo picking up my monies and whenever they got around to me, or whoever there was a contract with. And if you could pick up my money, I'll let you do that, as well as provide the security guard services in there, which led to Dad saying, well, how's that done? He did a feasibility study to find out what all it took. In this case, it took equipment, it took a vault, it took insurance. So he did all this necessary research in terms of pricing and what was the price per hour that Brinks and Wells Fargo was offering for their pickup service. He had to come close to, but under it. And then he went to Joe Bruno's, and Joe Bruno's allowed him to start picking up the money to all of its stores. And then because he also had the relationship with Birmingham Trust National Bank, then it was a lot because he had great credit with them. And then eventually, I remember one day when Birmingham Trust came, the manager, I think his name was Miller, came to Dad and offered Dad a $50,000 line of credit. It's like 70, it was 81 or so. And Dad said, he said, Miller came over here and offered me a line of credit. He said, I don't know what I'm gonna do with it. I think I'll buy me a truck or something. And then at first he didn't need it. And then I remember when Dad started venturing out and expanding the business and stuff by building more vaults and getting into the corn wrapping business, which was an extension of the pickups. Then they started doing the corn wrapping and all the 15 branches of Birmingham Trust. And they offered him, he expanded his line of credit from $50,000 to $100,000 just on Dad's name alone. He didn't have to do any credit checking any more than the fact that Dad's name. They gave him not two, but 3 corn wrapping machines in the 15 branches that was wrapping the quarter, nickels, dimes, and penny in that building, and it was all because of what his name had become. So
this was the bank that did that.
This what the bank did. So he started adding smaller customers, but the main customer that he had outside of Joe and Bruno's was the bank itself. The bank itself. We would go down to the vault, which was located on 17th Avenue, and the Independent Armored Car Association was an association made up of family businesses that were in the security armored car service. There was an association that still exists, an association of independents, and I attended the first day of conferences annually around the countries in which the offices or the headquarters of the particular family ran businesses, armored car businesses, were located. And the first one that we attended was in Tampa Bay, the two of us together. I don't know the exact year, but it was in the 80s. It was early 80s, I would say about 83 or 4. He and I attended the conference together in Tampa, Florida. And then they, because the conferences rotated around the headquarters of the individual members, he hosted a conference in Alabama. It was in Mobile. It was in Mobile, I would say, in the early 90s. So if you actually needed a reference point, should you talk back with the gentleman that you spoke about, the president and chairman of the board, he could verify some of the earlier years and the locations of the conferences in which they were hosted. So I can tell you that Dad hosted the one in Alabama, in Mobile.
Okay.
Usually it turns into invitation to trade associations, those people who also sponsored the conference in the various hotels and places around the country. There were vendors who attended, so a portion of the scheduling for the attendees would be to visit the exhibitions of those who sponsored the conference, whether or not they would be a seller or vendor of bulletproof vests, or the seller of guns or vehicles. They would have maybe an armored car vehicle that they were trying to sell to the attendees. They would have bulletproof vests. Insurance vendors were a big sponsor of the conference as well. Insurance is particularly important in terms of being able to qualify for, or to basically participate in any service. The insurance were offered by very few carriers of insurance. I think Dad was insured by Marsh and McClendon and Lloyd's of London. And insurance would have to cover the transportation of the valuables, and then also, which would be separate from insurance that would cover the contents of the vault. So the buildings, the two offices that Dad owned, that operated this country during the 20 years in which bank security was in existence, were on 32nd Street, 1210 32nd Street, and of course in Titusville, his last office located on 624 Go-Wye Place. They both had multiple vaults that were built according to specifications, and then Dad would have ordered a door. So these were tailor-made vaults to hold the contents. These were vaults that Dad had built tailor-made to the buildings.